Hi everybody, welcome to Career Compass Media, where we talk about everything related to careers. This is actually my inaugural video for the channel, so what better way to start a channel that talks all about careers than talking about how to ace that next job interview that you get. And really this video is going to talk about what to expect in a job interview, how you should prepare, but then also how you should answer questions in a job interview as well. So let's get started. All right, so let's start first with the most obvious question that you'll have to answer. Pretty much every interview is going to have some version of this, which is, tell us about yourself, tell us why you're interested in the position. Now, for a question like this, really it is a chance for you to let the interview committee, or maybe it's just a manager, whoever you're interviewing with, to get to know you a little bit. The key here, though, is let them know you a little bit. I've actually been in some interviews where, this question was asked and it's a 30-minute interview and the person spent 20 minutes simply talking about themselves. Like, really, this is a time for you to give a high-level overview of yourself, mostly professionally related to the position and why you qualify for the position. Now, don't get me wrong, you can get into a couple of, relatively simple personal items like your favorite ball team or maybe some of your hobbies or those types of things. But the reality is your answer should be about 60 seconds long. It should be kind of like your elevator pitch of who you are, your key points, how you match the position, perhaps how you best fit this particular position or how you've had positions like this in the past, and why you're interested in the position, and leave it at that. One thing I highly recommend that you always do when you're answering the tell us about yourself question is you record yourself. Take time to actually record yourself answering and making sure that you can get through everything that's a high point, professional high point, and really the key things that you want to stick out about you in about 60 seconds or less. Now, don't get me wrong, if you want to take a whole whopping 90 seconds or 120 seconds, it's probably not going to be too big of an issue, but definitely steer clear of taking 5, 10, 15 minutes of talking about yourself, because by the time you get to 5 or 10 minutes of talking by yourself, the interview committee is going to be wondering, when are we going to get to the actual substantive questions that have to come after that first question. So again, practice before you actually go to your interview. Get that elevator pitch down and really highlight the professional high points that you want when you're telling people about yourself. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the types of questions that you're most likely going to be asked in an interview. More often than not, you're going to be asked a situation-based or what's also called a behavior-based question. Now, these are pretty easy to spot because usually they start with the phrase like, tell me a time when this happened, or describe a time when this happened. They might give you the scenario, and that's why sometimes they're called scenario-based questions. And they might actually lay it out for you and say, pretend you're a supervisor of this department and you have two people who have a conflict over a timeline, and then you're asked to give some additional details. When they're phrased like that, they're leading you down what's called the behavior-based question, which means they're wanting not to know yes or no answers. They're wanting you to actually develop some fairly detailed responses on how you would handle situations. Because at the end of the day, especially for leadership roles or management roles, a company is going to want someone who is going to be able to work through a situation objectively, troubleshoot a situation, critically think about an issue before simply knee-jerking for a response. And behavior-based questions help kind of weed out those that are maybe a little too quick to judge. So let me give you an example of a behavior-based question. Tell me a time when you dealt with a conflict at work. Who was involved? How did you handle it? And what was the ultimate outcome? All right, so this is a perfect example of a behavior-based question. It has a scenario that you need to build, right? The what happened, the when it happened, the where, right? And just kind of some details and give a little background to it. Then, what actions did you take? What about that scenario? How did you handle it? Was your first step to dive right in and stop everything? Was it to investigate? That's what they're trying to basically pull out of such a question is, what were your actions that you actually took during this particular scenario? And generally, they're always also going to ask for, ultimately, a result or an outcome. When you answer behavior-based questions, it's really important that you answer each section of that particular question. So my tip for you is this. Bring a pen, bring a notebook, and make sure that you write down the key points. So whenever I get asked a question like this, I restate the question to them while I'm writing down the key points to make sure that I understand all of the things that I need to answer and verify exactly what it is that they're looking for from me. It also buys me a little bit of time to allow me to think. Interviews are kind of nerve-wracking at times, right? And so what you want to do is get a little bit of that oxygen to your brain, allow yourself to take an extra breath. And when you start talking and reiterating the question, it gets some of those kind of verbal jitters out, if you will. So how I would handle this and say, oh, well, thank you for the question. Let me just make sure that I got all the pieces right. You want me to define a conflict that I dealt with specifically at work. You want a little bit of the scenario, the who was involved, when, and so on. How did I handle it, or what were my steps? And basically, what were the outcomes or the results of that particular situation? Is that what you're looking for? And this gives them a time or a chance, the person asking, to say, yes, this is what I'm looking for. And so again, buying time allows you a little bit of just breathing room. As you write it down, as you answer your question, use your pen, use your notebook, and simply check off every time you get to one part and the next and the next. So you define you describe your conflict. In this scenario, I was maybe a manager at a retail division, and we had a couple of customers that were arguing and filed some complaints or whatever the issue might be, but you give a little bit of that scenario. Check. Who was involved? Well, I had some customers, there were a couple of employees. Do be careful with the who. Don't name drop, right? I mean, if it was a customer, just say the customer. If it was a fellow employee, say the fellow employee. Don't actually start throwing names out. That is something to be careful of. But you can set the scenario and know how many characters for your answer are part of this particular scenario. Check. Once I do that, then I move into how did I handle it? Well, these were my next steps. I wanted to make sure I gathered all of the facts in the situation, or maybe if it was an escalated situation, I wanted to make sure I de-escalated. So I removed a couple people. We went to a quiet office so we could talk a little bit more privately, or however you handled that. And then most importantly, always give the results. That doesn't mean the results have to be fantastic. It could be actually something where it ended not real great. If it ended well, highlight that. Highlight the result that was very positive. If it ended not so great, add an additional layer and say what you learned from it, right? Because part of the whole interviewing process, especially with behavior-based interviewing or scenario-based interviewing, is what are people willing to learn? What are they willing to change? And learning is a major thing that you should highlight. You are learning your growth as a professional when you're giving an interview. So the next question you're probably going to field in an interview is, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And it's a great question, and it's actually a very valid question, because when you think about it, a business wants to invest in the person. When you make an investment, you don't want that investment to go away in 6 months, a year, 2, 3 year, 5 years. So it's a very valid question. And one thing that I would caution you on when you answer this is, if your long-term plans or your 3 to 5 year plan is to do something totally different and really not be at that particular company in 5 years, don't highlight that. It's not to say that it's wrong for you to have your own career aspirations. It's perfectly fine. But if you're looking to get that particular position, the last thing you want to do is say, oh, well, I'm applying for this position now because in 3 years I want to own my own business, or maybe I have, I just started a degree program to go into a totally different field, so I need to, basically work for the next 4 years to pay for that. So essentially what you're doing is you're telling the employer, I need you to get me by these next couple years so I can just leave. And it doesn't resonate very well when you look at it from a long-term investment standpoint. And you want to be, as a business owner, investing in people, and you want that investment to return back to your business. And so when this question is asked to you, keep your answer focused on how you can grow in that particular company in that period of time. Answers like, well, I'd really like to learn about the different services that are offered, maybe, different cross-functional teams. Maybe I'd like to get into some project teams or improvement teams that, really would stretch my abilities or stretch my learning. Those types of answers are going to be much more well received. And if that's a little too much and you're thinking, oh, that doesn't really seem like me, keep it to the fact that you just want to be stimulated every day at work. It's like, I want to come to work, and in 3 years, I hope I'm loving what I do. I want to build a team. I want to be a part of a team in 3 to 5 years that is always forward thinking or is always moving forward. But keep it focused on the job at hand, because again, you can inadvertently kick yourself out of the running for a job as a good candidate by just telling them your 3 to 5 year plan might have nothing to do with that particular job. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into Career Compass Media. If you like the content here today, please click on that subscribe button, give a like, and also leave some comments in the comment section on the different types of content that you like to see. Be more than happy to build some custom content around the things that you're looking for. Thanks again.